Gracious God and source of all, bless our time together, that we may step from our present darkness into the inspired light of hope and love. Amen. Please sing a song to those seated near you.
Lord, help me now.
Good to see you, brother.
Lord, help me now.
What happened? What happened? We are very glad you're here. We especially welcome those of you who are guests or visitors or with us for the first time. We have a neat music program put together. I'm not sure the name of this group. It's kind of the first time that they've all played together. But thank you very much for providing. Allison, thank you. And what you all should know is it's not unusual to have a great message from Zach or who's preaching today, or wonderful music that you'd like to listen to or hear again. And by the middle of each Tuesday, you can go to our church website or the Facebook page, and the entire service will be on the Facebook page and on our website, which is...
It's hard to miss all the things you did. Oh, you were there to keep me on my feet. Wipe my tears when I fell to the feet. Always found the right word to say. Tell me on my way. Well, there are days when the sun won't shine and the sky's full of rain, and nothing seems to change. And certain nights, when too much in my head keeps me awake, and I can't catch a break. Oh, you are there to keep me on my feet. Wipe my tears when I fell to the feet. Always found the right word to say. Tell me on my way. Sometimes I know it's not easy. Sometimes you make me crazy, but I know you're always there, even when I don't care. You pick me up whenever I fall, never hit me when I call. Through my highs and lows, you watch me grow into my own. 'Cause you were there to keep me on my feet. Wipe my tears when I fell to the feet. Always find the right word to say. Tell me on my way. Yes, you find the right word to say. And now I'm on my way.
Genesis is full of compelling, strange, powerful stories. Here's one of them, translated by the preeminent Stephen Mitchell. Now, Sarai had not borne Abram any children, and she had an Egyptian maid whose name was Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, "See how the Lord has prevented me from bearing children? I beg you now, go and sleep with my maid, and perhaps I will have a son through her." And Abram did what Sarai asked. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. And when she knew that she was pregnant, she began to look down on her mistress. And Sarai said to Abram, "It's your fault, this insult. I put my maid in your bed, and now that she's pregnant, she looks down on me. May the Lord judge if I am right or not." And Abram said, "Look, she's your maid. Do what you want with her." And Sarai treated her harshly, and the mistress Hagar ran away. And the Lord found her near a spring in the wilderness, the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, where have you come from? And where are you going?" And she said, "I'm running away from my Sarai, my mistress." And the Lord said to her, "You are pregnant, and you will give birth to a son, and you will name him Ishmael, God has heard, because the Lord has heard your suffering, and he will be a wild donkey, his hand against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live at odds with all his kinsmen. And she called the Lord who had spoken to her El Roi, a God who can be seen. For she said, truly I've seen God and remained alive. That is why the well is named Bir Laharoi, the well of the one who saw and remained alive. It's between Kadesh and Bered. This next song, we call it a hymn here, Let It Be. The story we just heard is obviously an ancient one, 5th, 6th century BCE, filled with plenty of issues, I'll call them, that we have a hard time understanding 2,500 years later. What we have no problem understanding, however, are the universal themes of ambition, vying for power, jealousy, trying to figure out life and establish oneself in one's family. All the characters are struggling in this story, hoping to find their place in life, their home on earth, their place in the cosmic story, a story that tells them they're special, that they're loved, that they have purpose. This is the stuff that religion is built upon. The father and mothers of Judaism and Islam are this story. It begs the question, what is religion? What's religion's purpose? In modern society, religion's sort of considered a 4-letter word. The source, not the solution to the world's many problems. The word religion comes from the Latin re, again, and there goes my family. Re, again. They love when I get into Latin. And legare, to bind or connect. And so religion is reconnecting, ostensibly with the mystical divine. In his book, What is Art, What is Religion?, Count Leo Tolstoy, a thorn in the side of organized religion, excommunicated by the Russian Orthodox Church for his misbehaviors, he defines what religion means to him. Tolstoy writes, "The establishment of a relation to the infinite life, capital I, capital F, all around, a connection with the infinitude, capital I, that directs human conduct and is in agreement with ever expounding human reason and knowledge. We'll draw on this a little more as we go on. We need a bit more of this kind of religion, in my estimate. Tolstoy, interesting to note, was a deep influence on Gandhi, who he corresponded with, and Martin Luther King, subsequently, through Gandhi. Tomorrow's MLK Day. Sort of realized as I was making this sermon better yesterday. But for the purpose of this sermon, I translate infinite life as home, capital H, home. We're all longing to get home. And I don't mean the home with the address on it. And the best way I can explain what I mean by home is with a couple stories. When I was in my late 20s, I'd grown restless and I quit my teaching job at a high school in Fort Collins, Colorado, teaching English and history. And I struck out for Vancouver, BC, and divinity school. In search for the meaning of life, in search for the cosmos. I was young and thought I could do that. And I suppose for God. I certainly was not intending to become a minister and a preacher, but it's sort of happened that way. A good friend of mine, another story, a good friend of mine, we're going to call him Ishmael. He had left on his own search a couple of years earlier. One day Ishmael announced to his friends, all of us quasi-hippie, neo-tech Generation Xers living in Boulder in semi-communal conditions, that he was quitting his job as a journalist for the Boulder Daily Camera. He was selling everything, and he was joining the Navy. And we were like, you doing what? This was in 1999, different day, just a couple of years before 9/11. And his plan was to become a Navy SEAL. And although Ishmael had a college degree, he refused the officer route. He was enamored with the monastic warrior life of an enlisted special ops soldier. So that's what he was going for. It was a great risk. Over 80% of those try, fail. And if he didn't succeed, he would be swabbing the decks of the Navy fleet with other newbie sailors. We're like, this is the dumbest idea you've come up with yet. I stuck a copy of Moby Dick in Ishmael's bag before he departed for Great Lakes Naval Station with a note that said something about how he would need something good to read. And the first paragraph of the book was perhaps his story. Here's an abbreviated excerpt from the opening passage of Moby Dick. Call me Ishmael. Whenever I find myself growing grim about the mouth, whenever it's a damp, drizzly November in my soul, whenever I find myself involuntarily pausing before coffin warehouses and bringing up the rear of every funeral I meet, I account it high time to get to sea as soon as I can. This is my substitute for pistol and ball. There's nothing surprising in this. Almost all men in their degree, sometime or other, cherish very nearly the same feelings towards the ocean with me. Ishmael of Moby Dick and my friend Ishmael were both longing and searching for something bigger than themselves. The ocean and special ops seemed the biggest thing they could find. It's my opinion both Ishmaels were longing to experience the infinite life, as Tolstoy put it. What I'm calling one's capital H home in the universe that enlivens and gives purpose and gives meaning and character and nobility, and is the will and place of God. Really love. My friend Ishmael's longing for home came really clear for me. Okay, this is why he did it. When he related the trials that he endured trying to make the teams, as they call them, through BUDS, basic underwater demolition seals, where this wheat is separated from the chaff. The signal that you've given up, that you can't make it, is by ringing a big brass bell 3 times. The guys that make it never think about doing that. One of the stages of BUDS is combat diving in a pool with scuba gear. And one of the exercises is reassembling scuba gear that has been disassembled and put all over the floor of the pool, and your job is to put it all back together and start breathing again. My friend Ishmael was accomplishing this task without too much difficulty, I think irritating the instructors, and he's a pretty capable guy with a cast iron will, and so they decided to make it impossible for him and spread the gear out to where he couldn't do it, and see how he would respond. The spread proved to be impossible, and Ishmael never gave up, and he drowned in his attempts to reassemble the gear. At first, when I heard this, I was outraged, but he was pulled up on the deck, resuscitated, and this, as I understand, is pretty routine for the SEAL instructors to do. With that kind of resolve, with his ability, he was assigned to SEAL Team 4, deployed worldwide, primarily Middle East, and thank God still with us after over 10 years in. So yes, becoming a SEAL took Ishmael out of a humdrum life. And yet, in the end, with all the prestige, with all the honors, with all the valor, with all the extraordinary experiences that go with being a SEAL, it was really only a great distraction and temporary escape in Ishmael's longing for home and wholeness. He's still a great guy, don't get me wrong. But that's what it was. That's what it is. Capital H home, infinite life, connection with infinitude is not a place, it's not a prestigious vocation or title. It's actually all much closer than most of us have ever dared imagine. Christ called it the way, the kingdom of heaven. Buddha called it departure from unsatisfied craving. We don't arrive home and experience infinite life by studying the most important books the way I did, I like to think, at divinity school. We don't arrive home and experience infinite life by going out on outlandish adventures to hunt whales the way Melville did, or by writing a best-selling book. That's the one that I always think might do it. Or joining the SEALs. We arrive home, we make the infinitude connection, as Tolstoy says, when we begin to peer deep into our own nature and realize we've never been separate from home, from infinite life, from God, except in our mind. This idea is easier to understand in a post-quantum physics, post-Einstein, post-theory of relativity world, when we know, or maybe you don't know, but I'll tell you today, everything's connected, down to the smallest particle and up to the largest celestial body. And yet most of us live as if this were not so. the average appraisal of reality, and the universe is an illusion. I know, pretty good illusion, right? My second favorite illusion is ice cream, but it's an illusion. Who we are in God, some would say the cosmos, and who God is in us is the only self that has ever existed, that will ever exist. The rest is illusion. And here's a hint, as you think about this maybe, over the next week maybe, there's no such thing as a standalone you. The trouble is, most of us don't know this basic truth. And the thing is, it's not really our fault. No one's probably ever told most of us. We've never been taught how to be religious. That is, how to reconnect with infinitude, with the mystical divine. I'll conclude with these words by T.S. Eliot from his poem, Four Quartets. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all of our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. This next song actually inspired the sermon, and then I started looking at scripture.
Down to Houston, and I stopped in San Antonio. I passed up the station for the bus, trying to find me something, but I wasn't sure just what. Lord, I ended up with pockets full of dust. Well, I went down to Cleveland, and I ended up insane. I bought a borrowed suit and learned to dance. Well, I was spending money like the way it likes to rain. Lord, I ended up with pockets full of cane. Oh, my sweet Carolina, what compels me to go? Oh, my sweet disposition, may you one day carry me home. feels like things are closing in. The sunset's just my light bulb burning out. Well, I miss Kentucky and I miss my family. Oh, the sweetest winds that blow across the south. Oh, my sweet Carolina, what compels me to go? Oh, my sweet disposition, may you one day carry me home. May you one day carry me home.
As you go out in this week, wherever you go, Tom and I are going to North Carolina. Wherever you find yourself, may you know, may you experience that you're already home. Amen. And the people said,